Imagine standing in Venice. Not the Venice of today, no crowds, no souvenir shops, no gondoliers in striped shirts calling out to tourists. Instead, there is water everywhere. Dark, still, and silent. Wooden walkways stretch across mud and marsh. Small boats drift between low islands. The air smells of salt, wet wood, and fish. You hear the creak of ropes, the splash of oars, and the distant cry of seabirds. There are no grand palaces, no marble bridges. It is the year 900 AD, and Venice is not yet a famous city. It is something far more fragile and far more remarkable, a city that should not exist at all. To understand Venice at this moment, you have to forget almost everything you associate with it today. Modern Venice feels permanent, solid, ancient, but in the early Middle Ages, Venice was neither permanent nor solid. It was new, improvised, vulnerable, and most importantly, it was built in a place no one had ever intended to build a city. The Venetian lagoon stretches along the northeastern coast of Italy, where rivers flowing from the Alps meet the Adriatic Sea. It is a shallow, unstable environment. The ground is not truly land. It is mud, sand, and silt, constantly shifting with tides and currents. Before Venice existed, this lagoon was not a city. It was a refuge. The origins of Venice lie in fear. In the 5th and 6th centuries, the Western Roman Empire collapsed. Across northern Italy, cities that had existed for centuries were attacked, looted, and abandoned. Waves of invasions from Goths, Huns, and later the Lombards made life on the mainland increasingly dangerous. Cities like Aquileia and Altinum, once thriving Roman centers, were devastated. The residents fled, not inland, but outward, into the lagoon. At first, these refugees did not build a city. They built shelters, temporary wooden huts on small islands. They chose these islands because they were hard to reach. Armies could not easily march across mud and water. Horses could not charge through tidal flats. The lagoon offered protection, but it offered almost nothing else. There was little fresh water, little solid ground, few natural resources. Survival here required adaptation. By the year 900 AD, these scattered refugee settlements had grown into a network of island communities. They were no longer temporary camps. They were becoming permanent. This was Venice. If you walked through Venice in 900 AD, you would not see the stone city that exists today. You would see wood. Wood was everywhere. Most buildings were constructed from timber. Houses stood on wooden platforms supported by piles driven deep into the mud. These piles, long poles made from oak, alder, or larch, formed the foundation of the city. Driving them into the lagoon floor was exhausting work. Workers stood in boats, hammering poles downward through water and soft sediment until they reached firmer layers below. Thousands of these piles supported every structure. Without them, Venice would sink. Even with them, it was never entirely stable. The houses themselves were simple, rectangular, usually 1 or 2 stories tall. Walls were made of wooden planks. Roofs were covered with reeds or wooden shingles. They were practical, not beautiful. Inside, space was limited. A single room might serve as kitchen, sleeping area, and workspace. Smoke from cooking fires escaped through small openings in the roof. These homes were vulnerable to fire, to storms, and to decay. Wood rotted quickly in the damp lagoon air. Buildings needed constant repair. Modern Venice is famous for its stone palaces, some standing for centuries. In 900 AD, permanence was impossible. Everything was temporary. The layout of the city was also very different. Today, Venice is known for its canals. The Grand Canal curves through the city like a river. lined with monumental buildings. But in 900 AD, canals were not yet architectural features. They were simply natural waterways between islands. The city was fragmented. Instead of one unified urban center, Venice consisted of many separate islands, each with its own small community. Movement between them happened almost entirely by boat. There were very few bridges. Walking long distances was often impossible. Water was not scenery, it was infrastructure. Boats were essential for everything: transporting goods, traveling to work, visiting neighbors. Every resident depended on them. Even the poorest families owned small, simple boats. Without boats, the city could not function. Life in early Venice revolved around survival and trade. The lagoon itself provided some food. Fish were abundant. Eels, mullet, and other species thrived in the shallow waters. Fishing was one of the most important occupations. Fishermen worked daily, setting nets and traps, navigating the complex channels of the lagoon. Shellfish were also harvested. Salt production was another crucial activity. Salt was extremely valuable in the medieval world. It preserved food, especially meat and fish, allowing it to be stored and transported over long distances. The shallow waters of the lagoon were ideal for salt pans. Workers created controlled pools where seawater evaporated under the sun, leaving behind salt crystals. This salt became one of Venice's earliest exports. It connected the lagoon to wider trade networks. Trade was the key to Venice's future. Unlike inland cities, Venice had direct access to the sea. This allowed its merchants to travel across the Adriatic and beyond. By 900 AD, Venetian traders were already sailing to ports along the coasts of Italy, the Byzantine Empire, and parts of the eastern Mediterranean. They traded salt, fish, timber, and slaves. In return, they brought back goods that were rare in Western Europe: silk, spices, glassware, and fine textiles. These items were valuable not only for their use but for their rarity. Venice became a bridge between worlds, between East and West, between the remains of the Roman world and emerging medieval kingdoms. This position would eventually make Venice enormously wealthy. But in 900 AD, that future was not guaranteed. Trade was dangerous. Ships faced storms, pirates, and unpredictable political conditions. A single lost cargo could ruin a merchant. Yet the risks were worth it, because Venice had one enormous advantage. It was protected. Unlike mainland cities, Venice was extremely difficult to attack. Armies could not easily navigate the lagoon. Invaders unfamiliar with its channels risked becoming trapped in mud or stranded by tides. This natural defense made Venice unusually secure in a violent era. While many European cities suffered repeated destruction, Venice remained largely intact. This stability allowed its population to grow. Slowly, by the year 900 AD, Venice may have had around 30,000 to 50,000 inhabitants. This made it smaller than ancient Rome or Constantinople, but significant by medieval standards. And unlike many cities of the time, Venice was expanding. Politically, Venice occupied a unique position. It was not fully independent, but it was not fully controlled either. Technically, Venice remained part of the Byzantine Empire, centered in Constantinople. The Byzantine emperor was still recognized as the ultimate authority. Venetian leaders used Byzantine titles. Byzantine influence shaped law, religion, and culture. But in practice, Venice governed itself. Its ruler was called the Doge. The Doge was not a king. He was elected, usually from among powerful local families. His authority was real, but limited. He ruled with the support of other elites. This system helped prevent any one individual from gaining complete control. It also reflected Venice's nature as a commercial society. Power belonged not to conquerors, but to merchants. The Doge lived in a residence near what would later become the center of the city. But in 900 AD, there was no Grand Doge's palace. His residence was modest compared to the stone palace that stands today. Venice's famous landmarks did not yet exist. Religion played a central role in daily life. Churches were among the few buildings constructed partly from stone. They served as spiritual centers and physical anchors in an unstable environment. One of the most important events in Venice's early history had occurred just decades earlier. In 828 AD, Venetian merchants stole the relics of Saint Mark the Evangelist from Alexandria in Egypt. They smuggled the body back to Venice, hiding it beneath pork to avoid inspection by Muslim officials. This act was both religious and political. Saint Mark became Venice's patron saint. His relics gave the city spiritual prestige. They also symbolized Venice's growing independence. A church was built to house his remains. This was the early version of what would eventually become St. Mark's Basilica. But in 900 AD, it was far simpler than the magnificent structure seen today. Still, its presence was powerful. It gave Venice an identity, a sense of destiny. Daily life in Venice was not easy. The lagoon environment created constant challenges. Flooding was frequent. High tides could inundate walkways and buildings. Fresh water was scarce. Residents collected rainwater in cisterns or imported it from the mainland. Disease was a constant threat. The marshy environment supported mosquitoes, which spread illness. Sanitation was limited. Waste was often dumped directly into canals. The smell of decay and stagnant water was unavoidable. Modern Venice struggles with flooding and environmental challenges. In 900 AD, these problems were far worse. Yet people stayed, because Venice offered something rare: opportunity. Children grew up learning skills essential to survival. They learned to row boats almost as soon as they could walk. They learned to fish, to repair wood, to navigate the complex channels of the lagoon. Life was shaped by water. Even today, Venetian children grow up surrounded by canals. But modern infrastructure provides stability. In early Venice, everything depended on human effort. Nothing was guaranteed. The city's economy gradually became more sophisticated. Shipbuilding became one of Venice's most important industries. Venetian shipwrights developed techniques to build strong, efficient vessels. These ships enabled longer and more profitable voyages. Shipyards appeared across the islands. The sounds of construction, hammering, sawing, shouting filled the air. This was the beginning of a maritime tradition that would define Venice for centuries. In later centuries, the Venetian arsenal would become one of the largest industrial complexes in Europe. In 900 AD, it did not yet exist, but its foundations were being laid. Venice's relationship with the mainland was complex. The city depended on mainland resources, wood, food, and materials. But mainland politics were unstable. Venice
The northern
carefully
ports are key
balanced
to any
independence
agreement.
and cooperation.
Agreed, but we must protect this.
It avoided becoming too dependent on any single power. Its strength came from flexibility, from trade, from the sea. This strategy allowed Venice to survive while other cities declined. If you could compare Venice in 900 AD to modern Venice, the differences would be overwhelming. Modern Venice is monumental. Stone palaces rise from the water. Churches dominate the skyline. Tourists fill the streets. Early Venice was quieter, smaller, more fragile. Its buildings were mostly wood, its population smaller, its future uncertain. And yet, the essential character of Venice was already present. The boats, the islands, the dependence on water, the connection to trade, the spirit of independence. These elements would shape everything that followed. Over the next centuries, Venice would grow stronger. Its merchants would expand their reach across the Mediterranean. Its political system would become more complex and stable. Wooden buildings would gradually be replaced with stone. Canals would be reinforced and reshaped. The city would become richer, more powerful, more permanent. By 1200 AD, Venice would be one of the most important cities in Europe. By 1400 AD, it would control a maritime empire. Its ships would dominate trade. Its wealth would build the palaces and churches that still stand today. But all of that began here, in mud, in wood, in uncertainty. Venice did not become great because of natural advantages. It became great because people adapted to an impossible environment. They built foundations where none existed. They created stability where there was none. They turned vulnerability into strength. Even today, modern Venice still rests on those ancient wooden piles, hidden beneath stone and water, invisible, but essential. The city that millions visit today is not separate from its fragile beginnings. It is built directly upon them. Venice was never supposed to exist, and yet it endured, not through conquest, not through force, but through adaptation, through trade, through persistence. And that is what transformed a collection of refugee islands into one of the most extraordinary cities in human history.